Welcome to the Extraordinary Coach course preview. I'm Joe Folkman, and I'm here with my colleague and friend and partner, Jack Zenger. Jack, welcome.
Glad to have you. Yeah. Nice.
And we also have Brianne O'Corin. Bree is our digital marketing manager. Bree, you're going to talk to us about a special offer at the end of the podcast here.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And we also have Jennifer Lambert. Jennifer is handling the chat today. Jen, do you have any instructions for folks?
Yes, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the content. If you have any questions that you'd like to have answered, please chat them to me. And if we have time left over at the end, we'd love to be able to bring those hot topics to the surface for Jack and Joe to answer for us.
All right. Well, let's get started, Jack.
All right. The reason we decided to write a book about coaching was that nothing is more correlated with higher levels of employee engagement than increasing levels of coaching on the part of managers with their colleagues. We found that coaching effectiveness increases productivity. It drives higher levels of employee retention. It positively impacts the way management is perceived by all the people in the organization. So it's just a very strong influence. But as we begin this discussion, it's always helpful to be sure we're talking about exactly the same thing. The word coaching has different meanings to people. As we grew up and went through high school, junior high school, some of us in college, and played various sports, we had coaches. And in that case, the coaches were very directive. They were pretty autocratic. They replaced players and they called the plays with just complete non-interference from the players themselves. That's not what we mean by coaching. So we thought it important to show you the definition that we use about coaching in business. It is those interactions that help the individual who is being coached to expand their awareness, to discover better solutions from within themselves, and to then make, and importantly, to implement better decisions. So as you can see, it's a very different focus than we've associated with athletic coaching. I guess the important thing to point out here is what it doesn't say. Notice that there's nothing about the importance of the coach being more knowledgeable than the person with whom she or he is having a coaching conversation. It doesn't say that they're going to give them advice or give them instructions on what to do. It is very much finding the solution from within the person themselves. So with that introduction, let's just say, what does your organization currently do about developing coaching skills within your managers? So if you would jump on and kind of respond to this question, does your organization help managers learn how to lead more effective coaching conversations? Yes, no. We'll wait a second for the responses to come in, and
well, this will be interesting, Jack. What's your premonition here?
My hunch is it's going to be kind of down the middle. I think there's going to be a good percentage who do, and there's going to be maybe just a slightly bigger percentage that don't. So what's the answer, Terry? Kind of, you can. Okay, yes. Great. So 68% say yes, and about a third say no. Okay, we have a second question, I think, Joe. Is that right? Is that the next part of our?
Yeah, there we go.
How effective are these managers at having coaching conversations? And we're giving you three options there from which to choose. And so if you would jump in and respond to those three, we would appreciate your you are doing that. So what's your guess, Joe? Where will the
Well, I mean, I think we train people, but I don't know that they do it all that much. So I'm guessing that we might get about half. That's safe, isn't it?
yeah, that's always safe. So let's see here.
Okay.
So few spend time or have the desire to coach. That's about 45%. Half are effective coaches, 42%. Great majority, 13%, are effective coaches. Well, this would indicate that we have some room to grow. We have some room to improve, and that's appealing then for this conversation. Couple of comments. Why is coaching so important? We think it's really important because coaching seems to encapsulate much of what we know about good leadership behavior. It encapsulates much of what we know about human psychology and human nature and human motivation. But it's something that we can use in a wide variety of situations. Performance management discussions, career discussions that we may be having with one of our colleagues or subordinates. And we know that it has a number of positive impacts on the individuals with whom we associate. It impacts productivity, it impacts engagement, it impacts retention. And so, Joe, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the studies that we've done on those specific outcomes of when we've improved coaching?
Well, when we've looked at the data, and this is not a small study, this is 99,000 managers. And this is data from their direct reports. And one of the things we measured is the engagement of direct reports and the effectiveness of a leader at coaching and mentoring the direct reports. So what you see there is in the bottom 10%, if a coach is very ineffective, their employees are at the 26th percentile. But if a coach is highly effective in the top 10%, their employees are at the 74th percentile on employee engagement. And again, engagement really gets at satisfaction, it gets at discretionary effort, and the extent to which people are thinking about quitting. And in fact, if you look specifically at the percentage of people that think about quitting, the worst managers at coaching, those that are rated in the bottom 10%, have 47% of their direct reports who are thinking about quitting. And when you think about this great resignment, about the big quit, it didn't happen across the board for every manager. It really was significantly higher for managers who weren't doing coaching, who weren't very effective at coaching. But you can see that the best leaders at coaching were only 16% of their direct reports were thinking about quitting. Another thing we want to focus on here is something we call discretionary effort. And discretionary effort, every employee makes a decision. Am I going to give you 100% of my energy and effort, or I'm just going to do the minimum amount of work possible to keep my job? Well, the worst people at coaching only have 17% of their direct reports willing to give extra effort, but the best have 61%. So, Jack, there's some real payoffs to being an effective coach in terms of bottom line results, in terms of engagement, discretionary effort, and retaining your employees.
Exactly. So let's just kind of summarize a bit and say, here's our point of view about coaching. What's so important is that it signals to people that they matter. What we found is that it's often one or two important conversations that occur along the way of a person's career that have made a significant difference to them in how their career has played out. Through the pandemic that we've all experienced, it seems like coaching conversations matter now, today, more than they have historically. We designed this program by finding the best information about business coaching that we could put our hands on. We also read thoroughly the literature from counseling, from social work, from clinical psychology, and tried to combine all the good research that had to do with how do you create conversations that are motivational and that really matter. Now, leadership development is ultimately about helping leaders acquire new and more effective behavior. And years ago, the man named Albert Bandura at Stanford University wrote a book called Social Learning Theory. And he outlined how we go about learning new behavior. How does a child learn how to dress himself or herself? Learn how to tie their shoes? Learn how to use a knife or a fork when they eat? Well, they do it by watching adults around them and their siblings, and they learn by kind of mimicking that behavior. So this fundamental research on social learning theory is what is at the basis of the Extraordinary Coach program. We've added one more element to what Bandura wrote about. So there are basically 5 things that he describes. First of all, for people to learn a new behavior, they need to be clear in their mind about what were those key action steps and behaviors that are being displayed. The second thing we think is that they need to have some knowledge of how they're currently doing, some assessment, where am I right now? The third thing they need to do is to see someone doing it, hopefully really well, and they need to be able to recognize what that person was doing in that video or that real life experience that was so effective. And finally, then, they need to get feedback from others around them about the extent to which they're able to implement those behaviors effectively, and maybe get some suggestions about how they can do it even better. So we want to kind of jump into these 5 elements of the learning process and show you how they pertain to this specific program, the Extraordinary Coach. So we begin with point number 1. People need to understand what are those key action steps that a person who does this well needs to execute. Now, we've all learned in our life that maps are valuable. Ideally, they're a framework, not a cage, as Kathleen Stinnett, my co-author, kind of said. So don't view the structure that we're going to propose as any kind of a prison cell. But I would just observe that by having some overall structure for the conversation to follow, it really frees the coach up. It frees the coach up to listen more intently and to be focused on what the individual is saying. It allows them to kind of put all of their attention on this coaching conversation. Now, the framework that we're going to propose is something that we've labeled the FUEL model. And FUEL is an acronym or a mnemonic device to remember that you begin by framing the conversation. We don't begin by saying, here's the goal we're going to achieve, because we don't always know what the goal is when we begin every conversation. But we do need to have an understanding about confidentiality. What do you expect from me? What can I expect from you? So we can generally kind of structure or frame the conversation we're going to have. The second phase of this process or roadmap is to take the time for the coach to do his or her best to understand the situation as seen through the eyes of the person being coached. How do they see it? What are the challenges? And then that inevitably leads to the third phase, which is, hey, if you were a magician and you could wave your magic wand, how would this be different? How would you change it? What would be improved? And so you can explore then the ideal state, the desired state that you want in the future. And then the fourth element of this roadmap or this process to follow is to create a plan, milestones, timetables of what are you going to do, when do you do it, how do you make sure we make these decisions, and then implement these decisions. So this, in brief, is the framework that we propose and that we found very valuable. Unlike some, we're not proposing a separate model for every different conversation you have. You will find this fuel model to be applicable to many, many conversations that you have with people where you're trying to help them see more clearly the options that they face and to help select one and to help decide how they'll go about implementing the decision and moving on to future success. So that is the first step of this whole learning process. Joe, tell us about the second one.
The second step is to get some insights into the behavior and preferences that people have. I always think it's funny when we try to teach people something and they're nodding their heads and they're saying, yes, I do that. That's exactly how I do it. That's right. And so we think it's helpful for a lot of people to do a self-assessment to sort of say, well, how effective are you at listening? A lot of people think they're much better than they really are. So, you know, the most effective feedback would be a 360. And we do have a coaching 360 that gives people some very accurate feedback. But we do have a self-assessment that goes with our course. And we offered that to you folks before the call. And if you didn't happen to do the self-assessment before the call, you are able to, we'll give you a link to do it after the call here today. Basically, this is a slimmed down version of our standard assessment, you know, for the coaching effectiveness. And we only ask about half of the questions that we typically ask. But it does give you an indication on 3 issues. And the first issue is talking versus listening. And I was remember I gave this to a group of sales executives. And sales executives, Jack, they're really good at talking. and they had some negative scores. So the scores go from -5 to +5. And if you're a -5, you like to talk more than listen. So that's the first one. And the second one is your style more autocratic or collaborative? Do you like to give orders, tell people what to do, give instruction, tell, you know, and that's more of an autocratic style. A collaborative style is where we think about that together and understand it together. Again, that collaborative style is clearly a better style to sort of approach coaching with. The third thing is something that, well, actually, I'm the president of the club of advice givers. My wife elected me as the grand poobah of this advice giving thing. But a lot of, well, I'm a consultant, you know, I've always got the right answer. So people come along. I remember a call Jack and I had years ago, and the client calls up and they told us the problem, and I launched in to give them some advice about what they should do. And Jack said, before Dr. Folkman gives you his sage wisdom here, could I ask a few questions? He started by listening, and that was a much better process. But do we tend to give advice, or do we allow people to discover on their own? And, you know, we kind of doing it for them. And this gives you some indications. And let me tell you, a self-assessment like this gives people a sense of how their preferences is and what they tend to do. This is a very excellent way to start a learning process. So I like this a lot.
The third element of the Extraordinary Coach program is the opportunity for the participant to see good examples. Video examples of an effective coach implementing those 4 steps that we were earlier referring to in the fuel model. I can't emphasize too much how important it is for people to witness someone doing something really well. And it's clear that you can maybe have someone who was a live actor at every session that we conduct, being the live example, but that's a very complex and very erratic kind of way of going about it. So we found that by creating excellent video, that's the most consistent, reliable, economical way to go about having this happen. Now, I will just observe that the video that we have created has been acclaimed by some people who were kind of, experts in the field as being world-class video. It won many awards. And we think that the reason for it is that they're very realistic situations in a wide variety of settings, male, female, a wide variety of people providing these wonderful examples of how to conduct effective coaching conversations. Now, for the sake of time, we won't show you these videos right now, but at the end, you will receive, as part of this, you're kind of giving us feedback, you'll receive a link that will give you access to watching some of these videos and seeing the quality and the style with which they're being implemented. So we invite you to take advantage of that. The 4th element, which again, I can't emphasize too much, is the opportunity for rehearsal and practice. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the former governor of California and bodybuilder, once made the comment, "No one gets physically fit by watching me exercise." And watching someone do this well is important, but it isn't sufficient. The way we acquire a skill is to practice and to rehearse it. So as part of the Extraordinary Coach program, participants are paired up and they practice applying that coaching skill in a real situation that they face back home. And what's wonderful is that even with the use of virtual technology today, we can pair people up and have them practice with each other. And we emphasize that this is not role playing, it's kind of real playing, because it's really applying this process to real situations that the participant faces back in his or her job. The purpose of practice is twofold. One is to kind of give people the confidence to be able to do this. Because if people don't feel confident, no matter how competent they aren't likely to do it. So the purpose of practice and rehearsal is to have people leave with both confidence and competence. And that only happens when people have practiced and rehearsed. And then finally, they've moved on to the last phase of the learning process, which is to receive some feedback. So one of the things that we do, so we've created some documents that help in this practice session, this practice process. So you're not left to kind of do this totally on your own. But we've given you some very structured way to go through each of those steps, framing the conversation, understanding the current situation, exploring the optimum desired state, and then finally laying out a success plan. This then leads to the final step in the whole learning process, which is that then participants have the opportunity to provide feedback to one another. And again, we have prepared some forms which allow the person giving feedback to be organized and to be reminded of the things that they had seen their colleague do, and to trigger their memory about what was it that she did really well, and was there something maybe that she could have done or he could have done that would have made it even more effective. So there's a structure for the practice session itself, and there's a structure for the process of giving feedback. And so in summary, those are the 5 steps of acquiring a new skill. And we know that people can learn how to be more effective coaches. We have a lot of good data to support that. So, another poll for you. What are the biggest coaching barriers for managers in your organization? So if you would jump in, kind of reply to these, what are the things that stand in their way?
And on this one, Jack, they can mark all that apply. So
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Yes, please mark all of those that apply.
So you can hit a home run.
All of them is right. So we'll wait a few seconds here, but let's see, Terry, what are we seeing? What's showing up? Okay, so not quite half, well, no, almost half of managers are afraid they don't have all the answers. Let's just comment on that one a bit. What we believe very deeply is that the contribution the coach needs to make is to provide the process that guides the conversation. But they do not need to be an expert in the specific thing being discussed. Being an expert sometimes gets in your way. And so we would just have you think about, and as you work with your managers, help them to understand they don't need to have all the answers in order to have a meaningful, productive discussion with someone. The second one is probably the most frequent one. Coaching takes too much time. It's interesting, over the years, we've frequently asked people the question, have you in your career had a conversation with a manager or with a colleague that really made a difference to you, that was really impactful in your career? And most people raise their hand and say, yeah, I can think of that situation. Then we've said to them, okay, think about it. How long was that conversation? How many minutes? Half hour? Hour? Hours? And guess what? The most frequent answer we received was around 15 minutes. So the concern that coaching necessarily takes a lot of time and that managers don't have time to do coaching, we would kind of seriously challenge from our data that the most meaningful conversations that people could recall in their careers with their manager or their mentor or with some colleague was not a long, agonizing, time-consuming discussion. Not certain if the recipient wants to hear their feedback. Again, if the purpose of coaching is to help people understand from within themselves, find solutions within themselves, then managers probably need not worry so much about, are they going to like the feedback I give? Now, I realize that there are some conversations that the manager initiates because he or she does have something that they want to pass on. And that's absolutely appropriate and it's all well and good. But if as managers, we have more frequent discussions with people about things that are of interest to them. Then when the time comes that we have a message that we want to convey, there's a lot more goodwill in the bank. And this final concern about managers are uncomfortable to set themselves up as advice givers. Once again, we kind of suggest coaching is not advice giving. It's helping people to understand better the situation that they're in. Okay, moving on. One of the things that we have done as we've completed these programs, and we're going to back up one slide, if you would, Joe, is what are the main takeaways? So as you think about a program like the Extraordinary Coach, what might you expect people or participants will leave with? And we just want to quickly review with you the 5 most frequent participant takeaways. And the first one is, when talking with my direct reports, I take too much of the time, much too much airtime. In a nutshell, I talk too much. If that's a message that you'd like to have some of your managers hear clearly and viscerally, then this may be a good program for you. The second thing, Joe, tell us about the next 2, would you, if you would?
Yeah, that I need to be a better listener. By the way, I'm also president of this club. What's interesting about, and I just analyzed some data on listening, and I found that really good listeners are much better at building relationships. That this is and if you think about people you like to spend time with, you like to be with, they're the listeners. Being a good listener is a great skill to learn. People need to practice. Everybody thinks they know how to do it, but they really need some practice. And the third thing is this ability to ask great questions. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone where they ask you a question and you went, oh, wow, I've never thought about that. It got you to dig deep and really think about things. That skill of asking great questions is a wonderful skill to have for every individual. And again, practicing that ability to ask great questions is one of the skills that people come out of this program learning something about and really improving.
The fourth one is that participants have learned they just simply give too much advice rather than finding answers from within the other person. And the fifth one, interestingly, is the participants come away saying, having a process to follow really allows me to be more efficient. It allows me to be a better listener, and it reminds me about the importance of follow through. So here in summary, then, let me just kind of observe. We're providing you with what we hope is an expansive view of coaching. Not just conversations that you initiate, but how you handle conversations that are initiated by people coming to you. Yes, it also is involved with those conversations that you trigger, that you organize. But they can be casual, spontaneous conversations. They can be scheduled meetings. They can be performance discussions you're having. They can be career discussions you're having with your colleagues. This framework and these skills are very widely applicable. Let me now turn it to Brianne to talk with you about just a summary and the offer that we'd like to make to you.
Thanks, Jack and Joe, for highlighting all those great principles from this amazing development experience. I went through the Extraordinary Coach years ago, and something that always stuck with me that I learned there was a statement you said about practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. Practice only makes permanent. And if we are practicing the wrong skills or embedding the wrong coaching behaviors early on in our careers, they are very hard to unlearn. And coaching is a learnable skill set. Anybody can do it. And once it's owned by the leader, it becomes a way of being. You naturally do it in your conversations. We know that this is a critical skill for all organizations to have this strong coaching culture. And the way to do that most effectively, like Jack was talking about, is having this common framework. It's a track that everyone can run on. And many leaders are intimidated by coaching, especially younger leaders. But they don't have to be. If you can give every manager the tool set to be successful, then they can experience the fulfillment that comes from helping to develop others. So we want to show you how you can embed a culture of leaders as coaches through a learning model of pre-work, core content, and sustainment. So let me talk a little bit about that. The Extraordinary Coach can be delivered both live online or in person. There are many different customizable formats. It can be split into different days. We also have different development experiences that can round out all of the skills each coach would need. One is our Elevating Feedback workshop, which is a half-day development experience, and that can be delivered online or in person. And we also have Developing Yourself as a Coach, which is a full day experience with a 360-degree assessment that can be both online and in person. In addition to these, we also have micro-learning experiences and different sustainment tools, content refreshers, blogs, webinars, podcasts. It's all out there to help your leaders become coaches through every single step of the process. And we would love to talk with you more about all of these different options. Now, this was just a preview, and we want you to experience the Extraordinary Coach, the entire thing, and be able to see how it can increase leaders' effectiveness as coaches in organizations. So we have a special offer to receive half off an individual registration of the Extraordinary Coach live online workshop. It's taking place August 11th and 12th. It's coming up soon. So if you are interested, this is for US-based organizations. It's limited to 2 individuals per organization. Seats are very limited, so contact us quickly. Let us know if you're interested in attending that development experience online. Last is our exit survey. We would love your feedback. An exit survey is going to launch as we conclude this webinar. You can find the link in the chat right there, or it'll just come up automatically. We love your feedback. We even put a little comment section if you want to write to us a comment of what you enjoyed or any question that you might have that we could follow up with you on. And when you do that survey, you will receive those links at the very bottom. You'll see them there for that video that Jack was discussing about our coaching examples. And also a link to a video of Kathleen Stinnett, who is the author of The Extraordinary Coach with Jack, leading a real coaching conversation that's really valuable. Thank you for coming today and participating in this webinar with us, and we look forward to seeing you next month.